biology is broad,
Yeah.
but did any classes go deep?
You go deep enough for it to be an introduction, basically, of each field.
Okay.
So, like, evolutionary medicine was, like, scraping just the surface of what we would have gotten into if you go into grad school for it.
Okay.
So, like, I think that's college, right? You go into the surface of everything, and then you, like, decide to go deeper into something, and then it would be grad school.
Yeah. Okay, so the upper divisions were a little more smooth sailing, you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any challenges or difficulties with the classes?
I think the challenges was mostly stuff that was outside of EEB. So, like, I took a parasitology class. It was a microbiology class. And the challenge is that they have a different style of teaching and they have a different style of learning.
Right.
That class was mostly memorizing. Like, you have to memorize a lot of stuff. And with EEB, it's understanding and then reinterpreting. But because the field of microbiology, I think there's a lot more information to, like, just to memorize, like, to understand about different microorganisms.
Like break down the structure of a virus, name all its parts, things like that.
And how those viruses interact with our bodies. Some of the questions were, how did this disease happen? How does it grow in your body? And then you just reiterate, like, the entire, like, process.
Sure. Could you put an amount of time on how much you had to study for the class?
There was this one quarter where, like,
it was a heavy load.
A huge load of academics, 5 to 6 hours every day.
Wow. That's on the end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that was, like, the heaviest.
And then how about, like, an average quarter?
An average quarter, I would say 2 to 3 hours every night.
Okay.
Just studying, like, doing homework, whatever. And then before exams, it'd be a full-time, like, you don't even go to class anymore at that point. You're just, like, studying all the time. You
came in as curious about the pre-medical route.
Yeah.
And you're probably in the right major for that, you feel like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In life sciences?
Going into life sciences is, if you're going pre-med, that is where you need to go because you get all your prereqs done within the first 2 to 3 years, and then you don't have to worry about it. Whereas if you could also go into linguistics or English, except you would have to take all your prereqs for medicine outside of that.
Why were you interested in doing medicine?
Well, to be honest, it was mostly, I didn't really think of other options growing up. I was raised by doctors and I was surrounded by doctors as a kid. And I never thought about, like, my other potentials. And I've always really loved, like, making things, but I didn't think that was something I could do as a career.
Yeah, for a living.
Yeah, so it's definitely interesting how once you get into college, you see all the other potentials and all the other routes that you could go, and it seems scary at first.
Totally. What were those experiences that you jumped into being a pre-med? What did you get your feet wet?
I went into college looking for volunteer roles at the hospitals, at clinics. I looked for research roles at labs. Mostly to do with diseases.
Was that because of your interest or for
medical school? It wasn't an interest. It was more like a checklist for going into medicine. Because I knew what they wanted to look at. And I knew, like, what a typical profile of a medical student would look like. So I went for these things. Yeah. I didn't like working in the hospital. I didn't like working in the labs. So at some point, I think it was second, third year, I was like, all right, like, it can't be this upsetting to, like, trying to go find my career. Like, it shouldn't be this hard, like, torturous for me.
What was it that you didn't like?
It was just, it felt super repetitive. It felt like I had no autonomy. It felt like I was being drained every day, and I just did the same thing over and over again.
Part of that could be the student role, right?
Yeah, it mostly is because you're a volunteer and intern.
So a lot of these, they're exhausting.
Yeah, it was exhausting because it wasn't, I think it wouldn't have been exhausting for someone who wanted to be there. Clinic was a lot more fun than hospital life.
Why so?
I think it was the people. It was it was a community clinic. So being a community clinic, you meet more people and you talk to them a lot more. What I liked the most about the clinic, I worked there as both a volunteer for events. Oh, well, 3 things. I did events, and then I did pediatric literacy, where I basically just sit there and help kids with homework and stuff. And then I did clinical assistant, which is like I get the patients in and then like do their vitals and everything.
Yeah. Was that cool interacting with patients like that?
Yeah. So the most interesting part of that whole thing was like I enjoyed the pediatric literacy part of it the most.
Yeah.
And what was funny is that going into medicine, you would think that you would want to do clinical assistant the most because that's like the most related to what you're actually going to be doing.
Physicians end up doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually enjoyed being with kids, like having fun with them, teaching them, like learning with them the most. And that's also what contributed to me knowing, like, okay, I probably don't want to go into medicine if I'm not enjoying being with that.
So for a pre-med or a person who's considering pre-med, it's helpful to do these experiences and get a feel for what's good on your heart and what's not good on you.
Yeah, because I wouldn't have had that experience if I hadn't like been forced to try these other things.
If you're on the border about medicine, that should be automatic that you should, just in case, explore other options. Or
if you can't see yourself in the clinic or even know what it's like being in an office for the rest of your life, talking to patients, then you should try something else. You should try other things too. Not like just give up, but at least try other things.
At least try. What other opportunities did you do with or outside or inside the major?
Outside the major, my friend and I started a design club. He called me one night and he was like, hey, do you want to start a design club with me? And at the time I was still deep in the trenches of pre-med and I was just like, you're crazy. Like I'm not anywhere near design. Like why of all people you asked me?
You've never touched it before?
Yeah, I never touched it. I just illustrated. He knew that I drew a lot and I liked drawing. He was just telling me, you know, like it's not about whether or not you're trying to go into this field, it's about whether or not you're willing to try it. So I thought, why not? And then I went into it. And that was a big part of college for me. Going into design and like going into meeting all these creative people.
Okay, so you started 4 or 5 years ago as a bio major. You did everything. You did pre-med, and then now here you are doing design. Looking back on, you know, what you did, was it worth it?
Was studying biology worth it? And not actually going through with pre-med? It was worth it in the sense that I learned a lot of the things that I was curious about. I was always curious about. I had a lot of questions growing up. I never stopped asking questions. There's not much regret in the sense that I like learned things that I wanted to learn, and I was excited to be in class and excited to do the things I wanted to do. The regret lies in not opening myself to more things in outside of school, extracurriculars.
Since biology is so heavy on studying animals and, like you said, our nature, our environment, if you end up not doing anything with animals or nature and evolution in college, does it make sense to study biology still? I mean, does it make sense to go through all that curriculum?
If you go into college thinking that you want to get a degree that's related to what your career is, then no.
Okay.
But if you go into college thinking that it's a place for you to learn, then yes.
It's perfect.
Because you don't use a lot of things I use in school. But why do we learn it? We learn it because we want to understand like the history of how humans have interacted with each other, the stories that we come from.